I'm here with our district judge for the 258th Court, Travis Kitchens, and he is running for re-election. And I wanted to talk to him today about a few things. He's done some amazing things since he's been in office, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But thank you so much, Travis, for coming in and sitting down with us and letting people know who you are and what you stand for. First of all, let's talk about your family a little bit. I know that your father was in the military, right?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about it.
Well, he was a poor tenant cotton farmer in Central Texas, outside of Waco, during the Depression, and graduated from high school in 1943 from Moody High School. Went into the Army Air Corps and flew combat missions out of Italy over Germany and Austria on B-24 bombers. After the war, he was a captain, and went back to Central Texas, and under the GI Bill, bought a 150-acre farm outside of Valley Mills, and he was at that farm, and my three older sisters were born during that period of time. And when Korea started up around 1950-51, he went back into the Air Force, and he was a navigation instructor at Connally Air Force Base in Waco, and I was born there in May of 1952. A few months after that, he went to Korea and flew combat missions over North Korea, got back, flew double duty to get back from my brother's birth, which had been the fifth child of the family, and he's actually born on my birthday, and that day my dad got back to San Francisco. He stayed in the Air Force after that, went to Harlingen, Texas, where I went to the first grade. He was a squadron commander down there, and then he got into the B-52 program, and we ended up moving to California and Sacramento area, and he flew B-52 bombers, radar navigator on those. His crew was part of one of the test crews at Edwards Air Force Base on the B-52H bomber. Then he'd been promoted to major, and he was transferred to Georgia, to Robins Air Force Base, where my last brother was born. There was 4 sons and 3 daughters. Then he was transferred to Michigan, and he retired from Michigan in 1963 and moved back to Waco to go to Baylor Law School, Baylor undergraduate and then law school. And for the people in the Livingston area, he was in the same law school class with Ernie McClendon, who was our last district judge in the 258, and Gene Bush, who was Shelley Bush Sinton's father, and Bill Jones, who died a few years ago. So when I came out here in 1978 to work in the DA's office, they all approached me at different times and said, "Hey, we knew your dad," because I'm a junior. So that was the family. My father encouraged education for everybody, and we all got college degrees and advanced college degrees. Humorously tell people there's 4 geniuses and I'm the next to the dumbest. My youngest brother's a neurosurgeon in St. Louis, Missouri. My oldest sister's a retired college professor in mathematics and music. She's a classical pianist in Springfield, Illinois. And my next older sister was a medical technologist at Scott & White. She died of cancer in 2003. My next sister was a legal secretary in Los Angeles for 20 years or so, and she lives in Austin now. My next and youngest brother's retired from the health department in Austin as a computer programmer. And then there's me. My brother, that's a year younger than I, he is a regional pharmacy manager for HEB Pharmacies for the Central Texas area, and he's been battling kidney cancer for the last 3.5 years, but he was my first birthday gift.
You know, that's quite an accomplishment, what your father did, not only his military and everything, and then going to school and all, and then have all of his children getting college degrees and becoming professionals in their field, whatever they chose. That's quite an accomplishment.
And a lot of it goes to my mother.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that they say behind every successful man is a good woman, and and I'm gonna just leave it right there because.
Yeah.
But that is quite an
She'll
accomplishment.
be 95 this month.
Really, yeah.
So.
She was pretty ill a while back.
She has dementia.
Ah, okay.
She's still in her home.
Yeah.
We have 24/7.
Mhm.
My brother John, that's retired in Austin, and my sister Alma, that's retired in Austin. They stay several nights a week, and then I usually go up on Saturday and stay Saturday nights. And then we have a day lady we pay that
Right.
cleans the house. She's still in her home. Got her 2 little dogs.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
I'd show up on Saturday afternoon, and I usually go to Schlotsky's and get me a Schlotsky's. And I'll be sitting there eating, and she'll say, "You need me to get you something?" And she's always still thinking about her kids, even though she can't remember she just asked you that.
Yeah.
So we'll go from about 20 times or so. She'll ask me if I need a sandwich or something to eat, and I'm sitting there eating a sandwich. It's sort of interesting, but she's still always asking us
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
we need. So, you know,
I tell you, it's hard.
I was blessed to have that on.
Yeah. And it's hard when your mother is sick. My dad died 40 years ago. In December was 40 years. And my mom died 5 years ago next month. And we moved her to Trinity, and my brother and I took care of her. She really wasn't really sick until she moved here. But she was already sick, we just didn't know it. And so we had all these plans. We were going to go shopping, and we were going to do all this canning and all this stuff together. And we spent most of our time at doctor's offices and hospitals, but at least we got to be together that last
Yeah.
8 or 9 months. And there's nothing that's more rewarding than taking care of your parents when they need it. And I respect anybody that gives up their time and does that. It just needs to be done.
Well, I've sort of been off for a few weeks. My siblings are covering for me, so I can go to all these
Yeah.
political things. I'll be glad when it's over with, and I can go back every weekend.
So how do you like being a judge? Last time I interviewed you, you were running, but now you've been there for almost 3 years, I
A little over
guess.
3 years. I'd rather play music, but it's.
I've never made it to one of your
Shows.
things. I've been wanting to come to one.
But it's, you know, I've spent my whole life studying the Constitution and the law, and it's the ability chance that I have to try to make a difference in people's lives.
Right.
It's challenging.
Yeah.
I've been worked my whole life being in the middle of 7 kids. I started in Michigan when I was 10, shoveling snow and mowing yards because we didn't really have allowances or anything, and with that many kids, money was always pretty tight. When my dad got out and was in law school, you know, he wasn't working, and so I'd always worked and done different jobs. Besides being a parent, the judge is the hardest job I've ever had, much harder than practicing law.
Yeah. Well,
much harder than being a prosecutor, much harder than everything I've
You've
done.
had a bit of a struggle, especially since COVID came on the scene, where, you know, I know that you guys have had to do it through Zoom and then so long that the courts weren't open. And you know, how is that working now? I know your courts are open, but are y'all able to get rid of some of the backlog that's been there? I know there's different court situations. I know you do family court, you do criminal and whatever. But have you been able to clear away some of that backlog from?
Not a whole lot. We still handle cases when we were doing Zoom. It's just there's something about being in a courtroom that has more of a sobering effect
Right.
on people and the seriousness of what's going on. When you're just on a television screen like Hollywood Squares, you can't really get as serious as you can when you're sitting in the courtroom.
Right.
I'm a long-time trial lawyer. I mean, I've represented and defended cases and prosecuted cases for May will be 45 years. I'll have graduated from law school. I'm a person that likes to watch people. There's so much more you can see when you're in the same room with somebody as opposed to just seeing the talking head on the screen. Body language can convey an awful lot on the credibility of people and things things of that nature. So we did move along with the Zoom court, but the more serious cases really couldn't be handled. There's a backlog, but part of the backlog has somewhat to do with the personality of the lawyers, the personalities of the prosecutors. When I got out of law school and I moved here in 1978 to be Joe Price's assistant district attorney, we basically resolved 90% of the cases through plea bargains.
Right.
And saved for trial the most serious cases. There's only 12 months in the year, and the way the court schedules worked as long as I've been here, 1 week will be what's called an ancillary week. And for instance, we just finished up the ancillary week. I was in Livingston 2 days this week, and I was in San Jacinto County, Cold Spring 2 days, and I was in Trinity 1 day. And today was supposed to be Trinity County because I'm usually on Monday, but we flipped it because of some jury scheduling. So those 5 days are usually pretty full days of handling cases, hearing divorces, things of that nature, child matters. If there are plea bargain agreements, entering the plea bargain agreements, juvenile cases and things of that nature. The next week is generally a jury week. And so 1 month, we have a jury week in Trinity County. We have a jury week in San Jacinto County in that month. The next month, we have 2 jury weeks in Polk County. For instance, February will be 2 weeks in Polk County. One is Monday and the other one's 2 weeks after that.
Right.
January, we had the first jury week was in Trinity County. Had a jury there. The district attorney's office was only ready to proceed on 1 case. That case, the person entered a plea of guilty, so that jury panel was basically wasted. We picked 2 juries last week in San Jacinto County, and both of those cases were tried. And most of the cases are tried in 1 or 2 days.
Right.
There occasionally they'll take more than that. This is in California. We don't have cases that stretch out for weeks and months as a general rule. I spent 2 months in a capital murder trial back in the late 80s, but it was a very complicated case and lots of witnesses. In a capital murder case, it's individual voir dire of the jury, and they just take a long time. But most cases are usually resolved within 1 to 2, sometimes 3 or 4 days. Yeah. So sometimes we'll try to pick 2 juries. Sometimes we'll only pick 1 jury because it's going to take longer. December, for instance, in December, we were at jury weeks for Polk County. And the first week we had the jury. We didn't have one at the end of the month because of the holidays. So, you really don't have 24 weeks for juries. You have 23 because of that last. And so on the Friday before we were to go to trial on the jury trials in Polk County in Livingston, on the Friday the district attorney's office announced that they were ready on 4 cases. So we were going to try to pick 2 juries. And on Monday they came up and the district attorney's office said, well, we're not ready on 2 of the 4 cases we announced on Friday we were ready on, because over the weekend we realized we weren't ready to go to trial.
Right.
So one of those last 2 cases pled guilty and the other one had a trial. So we could have had 2 jury trials that month, but instead we only had 1. So we've got a jury Monday, and a few of the cases that were supposed to go Monday in Livingston will not go because the state's got problems with their cases. But when I started here, we basically would work out plea bargains with about 90% of the cases. Yeah. And we would save the limited jury weeks for the most serious cases. That's not been the reality of what's been going on. Like right now in Polk County, there are some 1,700 indictments pending in the 2 courts, the 2 district courts. There's about 900 pending in my case, my court. I can set cases for trial, but I cannot make the state nor the defendant waive the right to a jury trial.
Right.
So if they don't want to waive the right to a jury trial and try it to me, then if they don't work out an agreement with the defendant, then those cases just languish until we get to court.
Yeah.
And of those 1,700 indictments, that's not the true number of defendants, because, for instance, in Polk County, they indict a single indictment pretty much on every charge they can file.
Oh, okay.
In Trinity County and San Jacinto County, they'll normally, if somebody has 4 potential offenses out of 1 arrest, they will do a multi-count indictment, 1, 2, 3, 4, and have 1 indictment. Polk County, their policy has been
Right.
to have a separate indictment for each potential charge. For instance, I've got one case where there's 5 indictments for the offenses that happened on one day.
Yeah.
So I have asked how many defendants are in my court on these 900 indictments, and I have yet to get a response from the district attorney.
Right.
The other issue that comes up is the number of people that are on bond. And the last report that I got from my probation department is there's less than 100 people of those 1,700 indictments that are actually on conditions of bond. Most people just make a surety bond and there's no conditions on them. If a person files a motion for a bond reduction, they come into court. If I determine after listening to the evidence and applying the constitutional laws that a lesser bond is appropriate, I can reduce the bond, but I usually add conditions. It might be house arrest, it might be reporting weekly or monthly, taking drug tests, paying a monthly fee. So I'm basically, when that comes to my court, I'm basically putting them on probation, because there are people on the docket that have been out on bond for 1, 2, 3, 4 years that have not wanted to plead guilty or whatever's going on, and they have no conditions, nobody to report to.
Right.
So when they come to my court, I put conditions on them. You can do electronic monitoring, but the problem is that our counties don't have the funds for that. Harris
Right.
County will pay for the electronic monitoring, but up here we don't have the funds, and so an individual to have an electronic monitor costs around $300 a month.
Yeah.
Well, most of the people, probably 80 to 90% of the defendants, have court-appointed attorneys. They can't afford $300 a month because they're making minimum wage.
Right.
If they're working at all, and usually that's a condition of the bond.
Do
is that
these
you have to
people
have a job.
eventually get their day in court? They might have been out on bond for 2 or 3 years, and do they eventually see a judge, or?
There has been practice in the past of bringing them back every 2 weeks or every month.
Right.
If they're working, that's not necessarily a good thing. If they're not going to plead their case out, work out a plea bargain agreement, if the state's not going to make a recommendation that they feel is appropriate, then eventually they're going to. And they're going to come to court every month or every 2 months, sometimes
Right.
every 3 months, just to keep from falling off the docket.
Right.
And we had a lot of problems during COVID just because we didn't have people physically showing up in court.
Yeah.
And a lot of the defendants had problems logging on to the Zoom court because a lot of them didn't have computers. A lot of them would call in on their phone, and I've had to tell people going down the road on Zoom court to pull over and stop. I have to tell that to lawyers occasionally that want to do their Zoom court and they're driving down the road, which is
Yeah.
not very safe, I don't think. I've had to tell people on Zoom court to quit smoking because they're technically in court, so they're at home.
That's one of the things, but that's one of the things that, about court, when you walk in, courtrooms always have wooden floors. When you walk in, it's like boom, 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 boom. There's always that court noise, that court aura about it. And when they walk in, people walk in, they better be dressed appropriately. And I like that. You tuck your shirt in. You wear, full shoes. You don't wear flip-flops. I like that. But when you're sitting in front of a camera, they can be sitting in their pajama bottoms and just have a pullover shirt on. It doesn't matter. And there's no respect for the court when, that's what I would feel.
There was,
or the fear.
I had a guy on court about 3 months or so ago, and I since recused myself because I don't want him to make an issue about I might be biased against because of things he said. But we're going along in the afternoon, and sometimes we'll start at a 9 o'clock docket, and it may be on the 9 o'clock docket, but it may be 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or later before we get to your case, because I had the other day, I think it was 11-page docket with 70 people on it.
Right.
And with that many pending cases, you can't have everybody every month, every other week on the docket. And this one defendant that was on there, it was about 2:30 in the afternoon. He was on the 1:30 docket, and he was mad because his name hadn't been called, and he went off on a profanity-laced tyrant against me, calling me every potential name he could think of. And one of the lawyers said, "You're talking to the judge." And I said, "Sir, are you talking to me?" He says, "Yeah, I am talking to you." And I said, "Well, I would suggest," basically I said, "I suggest that you might want to comment down." And he kept on, and I didn't realize my heritage was that bad. But so I said, "Well, sir, I'm going to have to hold you in contempt, and there's going to be a warrant issued for your arrest. And what's your address?" And he gave the address, and I said, "Okay, well, somebody will be out to visit with you soon." And I looked at Mr. Hahn. I said, "Mr. Hahn, can you fix me up the appropriate papers?" And he said, "Yes, he will." And about an hour later, we got a call from the district clerk's office, from the jail, saying that the guy had gone and turned himself in, and they was wanting to know if there was any papers to put him in jail. And we said, "Yes, we're in the process of it." And then
Turned himself in after all that?
After all of that. And, I don't know. He's been in court a couple of times, and he's asked for a bond. Mm-hmm. And I recused he has an attorney. And the attorney, when it all happened, he was set for trial the next Monday, I think. And the lawyer, after it had gone on for a while, the lawyer said, "Oh, I just saw him yesterday. He seemed okay yesterday." I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm trying to get through this docket as fast as I can." And so we was in court about a month ago with this person, and he wanted to know when he could go to trial, when he get a bond. And I said, "Well, what I'm going to do is, so there's no question about my impartiality,
yeah,
I'm going to recuse myself from your case, and the other judge will be in the other judge's court," because you just want to make sure that everybody has a fair hearing. And while I don't hold it against him or have any issues with him, I want him not to feel like whatever happens is
right,
because I was upset because of what he had said in court. The other funny thing about Zoom, there are some very good attorneys, and they posted on Facebook their Zoom court attire, which was Bermuda shorts, flip-flops, and then a stirrup tie and a jacket. And I won't call their name, but
please don't.
but it was, and I got a kick out of it. I mean, because I sometimes wear blue jeans instead of dress slacks, but I've always worn long pants and shoes. So they had a picture of themselves in their Zoom court attire, and so the next time they were in court, I called out one of their names, and I asked him if he would mind standing up and leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And he got about like this and realized, and then sat back down. And he said, "Can I do that next time?" And I said, "Sure." And everybody got a little
kick out of it.
Little
yeah,
chuckle out of it.
yeah,
But like I tell them, it's Hollywood Squares, It's,
yeah,
and people just don't take it seriously. And as a longtime trial lawyer, I watch people's body language, and as
right,
a judge, I can watch their body language, and you can't really see
exactly,
the attitudes of some people when all you're seeing is this much up.
right, yeah. Yeah.
So
I
I
wanna,
didn't like Zoom court,
yeah.
but it was a necessary.
Well, it's good that we have it. It's
Yeah.
good that we have that option. We are blessed in that, there was a time when the courts would be closed, they were closed. And, and there was not an option to be able to do the Zoom courts and whatever and have the video. We're very, very very blessed to be able to do that.
See, on the Zoom court, you record the proceedings to the cloud on Zoom.
Mhm.
And then the Supreme Court came out and said that unless it's something that should be closed to the public, it has to be broadcast on YouTube.
I remember hearing
The Texas Constitution provides for an open court. Anybody can go to court when it's happening. But there are some exceptions. If there's a juvenile case,
Mhm.
the court can be closed. In some very sensitive type cases,
Right.
the courtroom, the people that come to watch it can be excused. There are times when things that you can legitimately remove everybody except the participants. We do that on juvenile cases. So on the YouTube, what a lot of judges do and what I do, well, first of all, I don't publish on YouTube any juvenile matters.
Right.
I don't publish on YouTube unless somebody objects and wants it published, any matters that involve children, child custody, divorces with children, things of that
Right.
nature. And I'll usually announce, it's my policy not to publish this on YouTube. Does anybody have a problem with it? And most people don't, because they don't want to air their child
Right.
out in front of everybody. And then the Supreme Court guidelines is as soon as the hearing is over, you delete the YouTube recording. So it's not out there forever to everybody, because the purpose of YouTube is to take the place of having an open courtroom. And if somebody doesn't come to the court when it's in session, then they don't have access to what happened because they weren't there,
Right.
without getting a transcript of the court proceedings. So the general policy is to delete the YouTube recording once the court day is over. Once
So are you doing it live through YouTube? Is
yes,
that
it's
what I'm
live through
understanding?
YouTube.
Okay, because I'm like, why would you delete and upload it to YouTube and delete from YouTube? Okay, I
You're
understand
just
that now.
uploading it to YouTube so that the open provision of the Texas Constitution can be complied with, and people that want to see what's going on in court can go to court and see it.
Right.
Now, when I started practicing law a long time ago, people would come to court. You'd have people come to court just to watch what's going on in court. You still have
Yeah.
some people that do that, but most people have gone on with their lives, and they've got other things to do. And when you sit in court, unless you're directly involved, it's not as exciting as some of these things you see on TV.
Yeah.
Not everything is Walkner or whatever it was. It's not that exciting. It's important, and it's important to everybody that's there.
Oh, it is.
But as far as being entertaining like a TV show, it's not. So normally there's not a whole lot of people in the courtroom except those directly involved in that specific case that's
Right.
being tried. And so that's the ruling, that's the provision from the Texas Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They have what's called the Office of Court Administration, which sets out a lot of these regulations and best practices.
Right.
And they've set out a bunch of these. For instance, for a long period of time, you were suggested that everybody that comes to your court wear a mask. If you go down to Harris County and some of the larger counties right now, you cannot go in that courthouse without wearing a mask.
Yeah.
It's a lot more relaxed up here. I had a sign on the door to the courthouse annex there in Groveton that said, "Please wear a mask." I came up there one day and somebody had torn down those signs. And then right after that, the sheriff went to the commissioner's court complaining about the mask policy in the district court. So I don't know who tore down the signs, but they're
Right.
not there. If somebody wants to wear a mask, they can.
Right.
Right now, the guidelines is to suggest that people do, but not to require it.
Yeah.
We're still having people as recently as last week that have had their cases reset because they've got COVID or they've been exposed to COVID. So it's still in existence.
Right.
But that's the Office of Court Administration in Austin through the Texas Supreme Court. They have these guidelines and these suggestions
Right.
on how you're supposed to handle court. And so I try to comply with what the Texas Supreme Court suggests.
I want to ask another question. We have a real problem with drugs, and I mean, your family court, probably a bunch of your family court. I'm not gonna say majority because I really don't know, but I would imagine that a lot of that deals with drugs, with mom and dad hooked on drugs, kids are at grandma and grandpa's or whatever. You got all this stuff going on. We have an epidemic. It's horrible, and they've declared war on drugs. That didn't work. They do all these things to try to stop the drug traffic and stop the drug problem. What do we do? What do we do in our local communities? What do you guys do? I know that a lot of your stuff in your court is going to be drug related, and that seems. Now I know that we have murder and we have other things, and sometimes that's caused the result of some of this, but drugs are a real serious problem in Trinity County and in probably every county that's touching Trinity County and every county that's touching those counties. How do you guys handle the drug epidemic? I know we've been talking about the drug court. I saw a thing written up on it, and I talked to your opponent about it. And there's some, I think it looks like a very practical idea. In the veteran court, I know that you guys have back in 2019, as it was approved for the counties, and it's waiting on funds. And is that going to be a problem, even like for the drug court, when it is accepted in these counties? Will that be a problem with a financial situation? That's a lot to throw at you, but
Well, I'll take it piece by piece. On the drug court, when I got elected in 2018, I believe it was in October 2018, then Judge Casey Jones and me, Teresa Milner, who was the head of the probation department, went to meet with a district judge in Angelina County in Lufkin, Paul White, who runs the drug court for Angelina County.
right.
So we went one evening and we sat through their staffing, how they talked to the different people that are involved, and then we sat through the actual proceeding. Mr. Hahn was invited to that proceeding. He did not go. He sent an assistant. After the hearing, I asked the assistant if they were going to be interested, because the district attorney has to be part of the solution. He has to agree to it. And he sort of laughed and said, Mr. Hahn's never going to agree to a drug court. Before I even became a judge, Mr. Hahn was against a drug court. I don't know why, but he's always been against it. So it's interesting that now he thinks that's a good thing to have.
Yeah.
And his idea of a drug court is to have a Zoom hearing with people once a month, apparently, and thinks that will solve something. That's not going to do anything.
So what is your I was reading, I don't remember who wrote it, but a thing on the drug court, and I was like, that sounds like it could work, and better than just throwing somebody in jail for 'cause, I mean, here's one of the things that I an issue that I see, because I have a lot of people in my life that are around drugs, and I hear them talk, and one of the questions, we only put the dealers in prison, the actual we call it recreational users or the addict. We're not after them. We want to help them. We want to get the dealers off the street. But then the drugs, I was told that the drugs are now cut so much with so much stuff that you have to buy more and more and more to get the same high that you got. And so people are actually having more personal drugs. And where does the line? Where's the line between the addiction, just a drug addict, somebody who needs help to get off of drugs, who wants to get their family back together, and somebody that's actually selling drugs and using drugs as a profit? I guess the drug courts can help with that. I don't know. How would that work together?
The drug court has basically a limited purpose, but you got to go back to the actual problem itself. In most of the divorces, the drugs are not really an issue.
Yeah.
Where you see drugs that are more of an issue in a child matter is child protective services cases.
Right.
Occasionally in a divorce action or a child custody action, the one party will ask that the other party take a drug test.
Yes.
And that's generally allowed if somebody brings up in the court, and we send them over to the probation department. Oftentimes the one asking for it will test 32. So that then creates a whole other problem. But in the criminal cases, A good percentage of those are somewhat drug related, in that may be an underlying factor. Some of them are just straight out drug cases. The way that the law is set up, the penalty or the whether it's a state jail felony or a misdemeanor or a first, second, or third degree felony has to do with the volume of it and the type of drug it is. Normally, when a person, well, first of all, when I have a bond hearing and a bond is made, whether they're a drug case or not, one of the conditions of the bond is to submit to drug testing.
Right.
And that can violate the bond if they test dirty. On a probation, they have the same conditions. Now, if a person has got a drug problem, and normally the probation department will do a drug evaluation, substance abuse evaluation is what it's called, to determine what the situation is. And it's not just methamphetamine or cocaine. People can have drug problems by being alcoholics.
Right.
So you look at that. You have a series of sanctions that you can go through. You can have them required to go to AA meetings, which can be very helpful. But they will tell you on the 12-step program, I believe the first step is you got to admit you have a problem. And sometimes it takes a while for some people to admit they have a problem.
Right.
There's a series of progressive sanctions that we go through with the probation department. We've got a very good probation department in these 3 counties. The people are very diligent. They work very hard at trying to address the problems that come up. We have what's called a color phone program where they call it on Monday, and if their color comes up, it's basically random. Also provide for just, if they have a suspicion, they can call the probationer to come in and do a drug test at that point. If they test positive, they're generally going to go to jail for a few days. Methamphetamine and those type of drugs are usually out of the system within 3 to 5 days. So normally, if I get a violation report on a bond or on a probation, then a warrant's issued and they go to jail for a few days, and we might add additional sanctions as far as reporting more than once a month or 2 times a month, maybe report weekly, maybe do that. We have drug patches now that are good for a 2-week period, but the cost of that's $75 a patch. So if they have to do a UA test, a urine test, that costs them $15 a month that generally they have to pay. You always have to keep in mind the fact that a lot of people can't afford this, but you basically do additional sanctions. You go to jail for a few days, they get out, they do it again, they go to jail for further. They get evaluated, they may be put into an additional program to try to help them deal with the program.
Right.
If that doesn't work, then we have another program that's about 90 days treatment program. If that doesn't work, they get out and get in more trouble, then they may go to what's called a Safe P program.
Right.
That's part of the prison system. And that's usually a 9-month or so process. Those are all before you revoke probation and send them on a prison sentence. If you don't make an attempt to have the person address their problem,
Right.
they're not going to address the problem. They're going to go to prison, they're going to do their time, they're going to get out, and they're going to get right back into it. And, ideally, you want the person to deal with the problem. But addiction is horrible. And
Yes.
until a person will admit and understand what their problem is and deal with it, the cycle is going to repeat itself.
Yeah.
And it's destructive. It's destructive of the person. It's destructive of their financial and their health. It's destructive of their family. And sometimes, in dealing with addictive issues, they have to get to the bottom before they start back up.
Right.
And I've had friends I've known my whole life, and some of them had addiction issues, and they had to get right down to nothing. And one person in particular that I know from Waco back in the 70s, he went through that whole thing. He graduated from college, but he got himself in bad shape and went all the way down. And he's been working with other people for 20 years as an example to help them.
Right.
And you know, sometimes it takes somebody that's been there to get somebody to click.
Yeah.
But you know, it's there's not a simple answer to it. Drug court can be successful. It's a lot more feasible to do this in a larger county. Angelina County is just, that judge has one county.
Right.
Over here you've got 3 counties. So you're, you know, if you have a drug court in Livingston, you're going to be relying on people in San Jacinto County and Trinity County to make a trip over there, or you're going to have drug court 3 nights a week in every county. And if I'm not mistaken, the drug court in Lufkin meets every week. So, you know, that's a factor there.
Yeah.
For the drug court, it's the same basically as for the Veterans Court. They've got a separate coordinator that handles it. They've got the same judge handles it, but you've still got coordinator, you've got staff and all that, so you're adding a couple more people into it.
Yeah. But
again, the main reason it hasn't happened in this district is that the district attorney in Polk County has not agreed to have it.
Yeah.
Now in the veteran court, there's some paperwork that was supposed to be signed by the district attorney back in the summer of 2019. I did an open records request to the Polk County judge a few weeks ago and got all the documents. And one of the last documents was an email from Tommy Coleman to the clerk, to the court, who had asked when this specific document was going to be signed and who needed to sign it. And he said, I will get Mr. Hahn to contact you next week when he gets back off vacation.
Right.
And that's a memorandum of understanding apparently has never been signed. Now we did file an application for try to get a grant, and Mr. Hahn was supposed to be taking care of that, and it got filed at the last minute and it got rejected because they wanted some additional information. We reapplied, and the response we got on that was because we didn't have an existing veterans court, they wouldn't consider us for a grant. I don't, the benefit of a veterans court is primarily on misdemeanors. Well, we have, I want to think that in Polk County, out of 500 probationers, if my memory's correct, there are 20 or so veterans on probation, which is a very small percentage.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of concern for veterans, and normally the lawyers know if they've got a veteran that they can bring it to my attention. The screening that they go through the probation department is whether or not the person is a veteran. Yeah. And so, you know, even though we don't have a veterans court, the benefit of a veterans court is generally at the end of successful completion of whatever the program they're put into, they can get their record expunged. If you get a regular probation, you can't get your record expunged. If you get a deferred adjudication probation, you have to wait 5 years on a felony to have it what's called a non-disclosure. And the general public is not supposed to be able to get to that except 31 government agencies can find out if that record exists. Of course, most of these jails and the DPS sell their records, they sell the records to ProData and some of these other places, and theoretically DPS is supposed to make them return the records, but they haven't been very successful at that, and if somebody has a record, you can usually find it on the internet. But the way that a person can have their record expunged if there's not a veterans court is if the district attorney's office would go into what's called a pretrial diversion, which puts them on probation for a period of a year, usually not more than a year, a period of time, usually not more than a year, and on a pretrial diversion, they don't ever have any court proceedings other than signing this agreement, and if they live down everything they're supposed to do, then they can get their record expunged with a pretrial diversion.
That's good.
Most of the district attorney's offices, well, the Polk County District Attorney's Office basically has a policy of no deferred adjudications I mean, no pretrial diversions on felony cases.
Right.
So, but right now, the number of veterans is really not that much.
Yeah.
But to have a veterans court, you're going to have a court coordinator, and you're going to have court staff, and without a grant, which the 3 counties approved it thinking there was going to be a grant that would pay for it. But the last time we tried, which was in 2020, I didn't try this last year because I basically tried to handle the veterans through the probation department. The 3 counties commissioners courts would have to approve about another $100,000 to be able to have the court staff to accomplish that.
Right.
So there's a financial issue there.
Yeah.
And there's also just the fact that, and actually up until 2019, my understanding is that we didn't have a veterans court because, again, my opponent was opposed to it.
So,
you know, and it's interesting now, he thinks this is really important, but he's done nothing for the years and years and years he's been a prosecutor to push these programs forward.
That's interesting. You don't really always know, how your court system works. I've gotten a real education here today. You've really helped me understand a lot. And of course, I've I watch court TV. I mean,
it's entertaining, but you gotta understand though, the cases they show there, they're selected. They're selected because of the personalities of the parties.
Yeah, there's a commercial for Sling TV. They want to get up, want to do a surgery, or get up and fly an airplane. Well, I watch Sling TV, and they I watch court TV. So but that's seriously, you don't really understand all these things. The average person like myself, we really don't realize what all is involved, and how much it changes with the different legislators when different legislatures come in, and whatever. But I want to change direction. We were talking a little bit earlier about the courthouse, the annex in Trinity, and what you've done since you've been there. It is amazing, and if anybody that's been in there, if you're having to stand around and wait for something, that's a perfect place to do it, because you can go down the hallway and you have maps and you have pictures and you have all these different things of the veterans, and we can bring our own pictures of those people from Trinity County, family members, and you put it up. But you got so much amazing stuff. Talk just a little bit about that before we break here, and tell us what got you to do it. And kind of describe it to us. Especially the map part. I love the map. You go down the hall and you got your maps of the different wars that we've been in, and it's like, I guess in order. By historical order down the hallway, and it's amazing. I've never seen some of these maps that you have.
Well, my main interest in life has always been music.
I've seen that.
My dad was, he listened. I think it was the Texaco radio station on Saturday or Sunday, whenever, and he was a big classical music person. And we always, when he was not on missions, when he was home, besides it seemed like we had a new sibling every time he had to leave, he always listened to classical music, and that's how I was raised. And but my interest besides that has always been government, constitutional law, and history. And as part of the history, growing up on Air Force bases, not really realizing at that time, but as I got older, looking back on it, you have to really appreciate the common man and their service to the greater good of the nation. And that's the thing that most people don't stop and think about. Now, we've got a volunteer army now. We've had for some time after Vietnam. So all the people that have served since then are people that have volunteered to serve,
Right.
and for various reasons. but from Vietnam and before, most of the people that served were drafted. And I know my friends that came back from Vietnam, universally they felt like they were not appreciated because it was a very divisive war.
They were not appreciated.
And it was a war that politicians and even a lot of the military felt like, if not at the time in retrospect, that we should not have gotten into.
Right.
War is generally decided on by people, oftentimes that have never served. But Dale Everett over in San Jacinto County gave me the idea to do this in Trinity County. I had done a lot of work on my father's history and had pictures and all that kind of stuff in my office here when I was here over in Groveton. When I was there in my office when I moved to Alaska, and had my father's medals and pictures of his planes and things. But I never really had anything else on anybody else. And several years back, before I ever decided to run, I ran into Dale Everett. I generally would do work for veterans either at a free or for a reduced legal fee.
Right.
When I would find out, and I would talk with them about their service and all. And I ran into him and actually was helping a person he knew in a criminal case over there that I just was helping and not charging, what we call pro bono. And in going over to San Jacinto County meeting with him, he had started in the basement of a Veterans Museum, basically. And that's where I got the idea to want to do it in Trinity County, because I knew a lot of veterans from over here, a lot of people that served in World War II in
Right.
Korea and Vietnam. And so when I got elected, I went to the Commissioner's Court because I wanted to have my main office in Groveton. At that point, the main office for the 258th was in Polk County in the Criminal Justice Center over there that had been fixed up, and it's a real nice office, nothing wrong with it. But I've been in Groveton since 1978, and I live in Groveton. I've been in Trinity County, and I wanted something over here in the
Right.
courthouse. And so I went to the Commissioner's Court and asked them to allow me to have an office here. And you've seen it. They did an excellent job of
Yes.
Keith
You have a
Turner.
beautiful office.
Keith Turner did the woodwork in there and remodeling. And I asked them also, I said, can I have these long hallways that have nothing on them? Can I have these to make a veterans
Yeah.
exhibit? And they said yes. There was some concern at first that it would only be temporary, and I got a commitment from the Commissioner's Court that whatever I did there, whatever we did there, would be a permanent fixture in the courthouse.
Well, it's amazing.
There are 12 young men from Trinity County that were killed in Vietnam, whose names are on the Vietnam Memorial in Washington. Right. And Bubba Barnes over here has done a lot of amazing research and work. And there's a 13th name.
I published his book.
Right, I have that, yeah. Just amazing piece of work. And there's a 13th name, and I haven't been able to get the time to get that, but you can get a little rubbing off of the wall through the Vietnam, I forget their name right now, but the people that maintain WWMF, I believe is what it's called.
Yeah, the website's there if somebody wants to see it.
And I was able to get the rubbings of the 12 young men. And then on the website, you can also get their picture. Most of them have their picture and their information. And so I was able to get all that together. And Piney Woods Printing over in Lufkin, they donated the printing work to put together those exhibits. And then I matted and framed it with the rubbings with their other information. And so Mike Dew with the Woodworks place there in Groveton fixed up the sign above it that the Trinity County Vietnam Memorial for those 12. And then going back down the wall, those maps you were talking about, and then individual photographs from all the different people in the area and people that are here that we put up with a lot of other articles. Some of those have been donated by Dale Everett from San Jacinto County.
Well, it's amazing.
And I keep asking people, you know, bring us. We canceled court today, and there was a gentleman that showed up, had a veteran hat on, and I asked him if he lived in Trinity County. He said he'd moved here a while back, and I said, well, I was kidding him. I said, Army, is that part of the military? And, oh yes, you know, 101st or whatever it was. And I said, do you have a picture of yourself? Because he was looking at pictures, and he said, yeah. I said, get it up here. I'll get it framed. We'll put it up. And I tell that to anybody that's here that's got relatives. Get that to me.
I've been planning to get my granddaughter, my oldest granddaughter is in the Navy. She's a corpsman and has been in the Navy for going on 3 years now. And I have a feeling, going to be in the Navy for a long time. She loves the Navy.
Well,
and I've been meaning to get her picture to you.
That.
But
give me her picture. We'll get it up there. Anybody else out there? I mean, this is to be remembered.
Absolutely.
I mean, I grew up on Air Force bases. If anybody thinks that I don't have a lot in my heart for veterans.
Oh, no. Anybody that knows you have a heart for veterans. And I just want to thank you so much for coming in and sitting down with me today. And what I want, before we stop, I'd like for you to just look into the camera. And for just a minute, you don't have to do it long, and just tell your constituents, the people who voted for you, the people that will vote for you, why you're the best man for the job.
I have spent close to 50 years studying the Constitution and the laws, through undergraduate, through law school, through practicing the law. I worked my whole life. I understand the strains that are on people. For a period of time in college, I worked at the Gatesville State School for Boys when I studied juvenile delinquency, which is one of the areas that I spent a lot of time studying. I also worked in a children's psychiatric hospital for about a year during the last part of my law school. So I have real concerns about mental health. I've practiced law in all kinds of areas. When I moved here in '78 and worked as assistant district attorney, I was allowed to have a private practice as long as I did the work I was assigned as an assistant district attorney. And so I started doing divorces and property owner association work and civil lawsuits and all that on the side. And so I've got 45 years of doing all kinds of law. I've been involved in over 60 appeals, so I understand the appellate law. I understand that the judge in this county and in Polk County and Trinity County have to be knowledgeable in all areas of the law, and that's what I've studied for almost a half century. If you're in Harris County, they have a criminal district court. They do nothing but criminal law. You have a family district court which does nothing but family law. You have a civil court that does nothing but civil law. You have a probate court that does nothing but probate law. Up here, you can't be a one-trick pony. You've got to know all the different types of law that's going to come in. And I've done that forever. You take an oath as a judge to preserve, protect, and defend the constitutional laws of the United States. My job as a judge is not to make law. It's to apply the facts in the case fairly impartially to the law that applies. If I don't, then appellate court will come back and tell me I was wrong. So I try not to get reversed. There's actually been 3 appeals in criminal cases, one in each county. There was one over here where I suppressed an illegal arrest and search by the Sheriff's Department. I was told I was wrong, and the district attorney appealed it. The Court of Appeals came back and concluded that I was correct, that the Sheriff's Department had violated the constitutional rights of the accused. In Polk County this past year, the district attorney there filed an appeal claiming that I had entered an illegal sentence in a case that he disagreed with my sentence. The Court of Appeals dismissed his appeal and said I'd done nothing wrong. A defendant in San Jacinto County appealed a decision I made on a sentence, and they were concerned about some evidence I allowed in, and the Court of Appeals said I was correct there. I study the law. I try to make the right decision. I try to be fair to everybody and treat them with dignity and respect that they're entitled to, regardless of what they're charged with. I try to do the same for the attorneys, and I just think that at this point in time, with my 44 plus years of doing all kinds of work, that I'm the best choice for the people. I gave up a 40-year law practice to do this, and I hope to be able to do this until I die or retire.
Thank you so much for coming in today. I appreciate it, and good luck in the race.
Thank you.